dynamic products that you can increase and decrease the quantity of, and create a completely dynamic and functional cart page. So we're gonna go ahead and start off where we left off when we were creating this HTML and CSS website from scratch. If you guys missed that video, I'll leave a link up top and down below for you guys. But we're gonna start off in our index.html. We need to go to each one of our products, and we're going to add a custom attribute called data-pizza-id. And we're going to start at 1 for our pepperoni pizza. And then I already added it on our supreme pizza, but I changed the value to 2. And then for our cheese pizza, it's going to be 3. And in today's video, we're just gonna focus on the products that are on the index page, but keep in mind that you can reuse these on duplicated items in the menu page, and then you can continue off at 4, 5, and 6 for the additional items and go for however many products you guys want to have. And then for each one of our minus buttons here, we need to add a class called minus button, because we're going to use that to manipulate what the quantity is here. Buttons where we want to add quantity, we want to add a class called plus button. And then for our H4 element that's containing the quantity for each one of our products, we want to add a class equal to counter. And then for each one of these down below, I also added those classes as well. Now we can go start developing our JavaScript, and these functions we're just gonna push to the bottom because this is what we did in our last video and they're not gonna interfere with what we're doing today. So to start off, we wanna use document.add event listener, and what we want to do here is add an event listener called DOM content loaded. So this is going to wait for everything to render, specifically our HTML and CSS content, before it runs any of our JavaScript code. Then we want to create a callback function here within our event listener. Then we're going to create a constant variable called pizza elements, and within this variable, what we are going to do is we're going to use document.querySelectorAll so we can get every case of this class that appears on our page here. So what we want to do is get our add selected class, which you guys can see over here is going to be this one. So it's going to be the 3 elements, specifically the first one that subtracts quantity, the second one that holds the quantity that we select, and the third element that we can increase quantity by clicking on. We're specifically going to get our add to cart buttons here. So we're going to call that variable exactly that. And then again, we're going to use our document.querySelectorAll and simply select our add to cart class, which is specifically going to be our add to cart button, which you guys can see over in our developer tools right here. Next, we want to create a function called update counter, and this is what we're going to use to update the value of our products when we click the plus or minus. We're going to pass 2 parameters, the first being our element and then the next being the value. Then what we want to do is we simply want to change the text content of our element like so and make that equal to the value that we pass in. Next, we want to create a function called handleQuantity and what this is going to do is it's going to again help us with our increasing and decreasing value here. And we want to pass a button argument here along with an increment argument, just like so. And then we want to create a constant variable called counter here, and we're going to make this equal to button.closest, and this is going to listen for the closest occurrence of it, meaning if we click this plus here, it's going to increment this value here. And we're going to grab our add selected class, and then we want to use our query selector here to grab our class name of counter. So this is going to grab the closest occurrence of our add selected class, and then within that it's going to query selector for our counter. So basically what's going to happen is if I click this button here, it's going to affect this quantity or this number here. And then we want to create another variable, but we don't want this one to be a constant, and we're going to call this current value. And what we want to do is use our built-in parse int function here, and what this is going to do is it's going to convert our counter dot text content to an integer from a string. Next, we want to use an if statement, and we want to check if increment is true or not. Then within this if statement, we want to use another if statement, or you could use the and operator here, but I'm just going to go ahead and add another if statement so you guys can clearly see this. And we want to check if our current value is less than 10, because we only want the values here to be from 1 to 10 based on what you select. And then from here, we want to increase our current value. So we're going to use our current value variable and increment it by 1 using our plus plus. Then we want to run our update counter function, and we're going to pass in our counter and our current value. So now we're successfully calling our update counter function to increase the quantity of this when we click on it. But there's a few more things that we need to do. So connected to our first if statement here, we want to add an else statement, and then we want to check if our current value is greater than 0. And if it's greater than 0, what we want to do is decrement our current value using our minus minus operator here. And then we also want to run our update counter function again and pass in our counter and our current value as the parameters. Now you're going to notice if we go over here and try this out, it's not going to do anything because we actually need to add our event listeners now, because it's not listening for any events and we're not actually calling this function anywhere. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use our pizza elements variable here, and this is going to create something that's basically like an array because we're using query selector all. So that means we can use our for each method here, which is basically going to be an array loop. And then from here, we're going to create a new function, and we're going to pass a parameter called pizza. And then we want to create variables for our minus button. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our document.query selector to get the minus button class from our DOM here. And then we want to do the same thing again, but this time for our plus button class. So I'll just copy and paste it, change my variable name, and change my class name so they correctly match. We don't have any errors. Event listener to our minus button using .add event listener, and we want this to listen for a click event, and then we also want to utilize a callback function here. And now we want to call our handle quantity button function and pass in this, which is going to refer to our minus button here because that's where we're tying the event listener to. Then we also want to pass in false. And then we want to do this same thing again for our plus button, but instead of passing false, we want to pass plus, and we also want to add this to our plus button here. So now you guys will notice if we go over here and try and use it, it's not actually going to work because I accidentally tried to pass plus right here, and I need to actually pass true. Document where I should use the parameter that I passed in my function of pizza here. So now if we change that to pizza, you're going to notice that if we go ahead and try and increment this, that it's going to go ahead and work. Now we need to create an event listener for when we actually click our add to cart buttons, that will take the quantity that we select and our item ID and put it over here underneath our order details in our cart/order page. So to do that, we're going to use our add to cart buttons variable, and we're going to use our for each array loop method here, and we're going to pass in button for this, use our arrow syntax, and on each one of our buttons, what we want to do here is we want to add an event listener to that button, meaning our add to cart button here. And what we want to listen for is we want to listen for the click event. And then, even though we haven't created it yet, we want to call our add to cart function. So we're going to get an error that says add to cart is not defined, but that's simply because we haven't created this function yet. And specifically when using event listeners in JavaScript, you want to remember that you don't call a function with parentheses here. You actually just leave it like that. So now we're going to create our add to cart function here, and we're going to pass our event object into this function. And we want to start off by selecting our pizza container. So we're going to create a variable called pizza container, and we're going to use our event.target.parent element. So what this is going to do is it's going to select the parent element of our add to cart button here. And if we look in our elements here, you're going to see that this is going to be the parent of where our button is placed. And so this is going to allow us to get this data-pizza-id value that we will use to increase these and add them to our cart page. And then this, I need to correct that to constant. And then I need to create another constant called pizza name. And we're going to reference our pizza container, which again is going to be this element here. And then we want to use our query selector method to get our h4 element, which is going to be this one here, because it's going to select the first occurrence of an h4 element within our container here. And then we want to specifically get the text content. Now we want to set up another variable called pizza price, and this one's going to get a little bit more advanced because here's where we're going to actually grab our price value from our title here. Then we want to use our parse float method here, because we want to convert our value to a floating integer. Then we're going to reference our pizza container variable, and we're going to use our query selector again, reference our h4. We're going to get the text content again from here. Then we're going to use our dot replace method here because we want to replace all of our non-number characters. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use a simple regular expression that's going to look for any value that is not a number item, like 1, 4, 9, or 9 here. So we'll get rid of everything else. And then we want to replace that with nothing. So we're just going to leave empty parentheses like so. Then we want to get our pizza ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to reference our pizza container. We need to go into the data set of our pizza container, which again is our parent element here. And we want to pull out the pizza ID value. And the way JavaScript works is it automatically converts data set attributes in your HTML to camel case variables like this. So if we go take a look at our container here, you're going to see that our data-pizza ID is equal to 1, but JavaScript sees our data-pizza ID as pizza ID, like so. So that's what I'm referencing here. I'm referencing number 1. And then we want to get our counter val variable going, and we're going to use our parse int built-in method. And what this is going to do is it's going to convert a string into an integer. And we want to get our pizza container variable, use our query selector to grab our counter dot text content. And remember, we're converting that from a string into an integer. And we're going to use our let keyword because we're going to want to change our cart items variable going on in our JavaScript. And we're going to use JSON.parse here. You guys can see that this converts a JSON from a string into an object. Now we want to use our session storage here. And what this is going to do is it's going to store every time you add something to the cart, it'll store that to your browser session storage. And then we're going to use that storage to dynamically render your selected cart items over here where it says order details. And keep in mind, session storage is only active for that session in your browser. So if you close out your browser, that session storage is going to be wiped out. If you want it to be there, even if you close out of the website, let's say, you can use local storage here. And then we're going to use our built-in method of get item, and we want to get our cart items here. Now, if it's not able to locate our session storage and get our cart items, what we want to do is add our OR operator here and just place an array, because if it's not able to run this portion here, we have a fallback of just a blank array. Then what we want to do is create another variable called existing pizza index, and we're going to use this to search for a pizza index that's already stored within our session storage. We want to reference our cart items variable, use find index, which is another built-in method into JavaScript, and we're simply going to use our arrow function syntax here to look to see if our pizza index has already been added to our cart. Using item and then our arrow syntax, then item dot name equal to pizza name. So this is going to see if these two values are equal here. So this is going to return one of two things. If this returns -1, it's going to mean that our pizza ID has already been added to the cart. So that's going to take us into the next portion where we use our if statement to dynamically start rendering this into our cart/order page. Now we're going to use an if statement to check if our existing pizza index is not equal to -1, which means that it's already in our cart. We need to use our cart items, reference our existing pizza index, dot quantity, and we want to add the value of our counter val variable. So what this is going to do is it's basically saying if this is already in the cart here, we just want to add the quantity based on the user selection. So if I add 1 pepperoni to my cart, then I come back here and add 2 more pepperoni, it's going to add up to 3 over here in my order details, but it's all going to be seen on the same line, which you guys will see in a moment. Now what we need to do is include an else statement where we push our new item into our cart. So what we're going to do is we're going to use cart items.push, and again, this is storing it in our session storage here, and I'm simply going to copy and paste this for now. But what we're doing is we're adding an object, and we're adding an ID that is equal to our pizza ID, a name equal to our pizza name, a price equal to our pizza price, and then a quantity equal to the counter value variable. So the first time you select 1 pepperoni pizza, it's going to run this part of the function down here and push this in. And so now to officially put this value within our session storage, we want to reference our session storage again, and we want to use set item, which again is another built-in function. Then we want to get our cart items here, and we want to use our JSON.stringify function, which is going to convert our cart items into a string. Now what we're going to do is we're going to reference our reset counter function, which we have not created yet, and we're going to pass in pizza container into this function call. And then down below here, we're going to go ahead and create our reset counter function, which is going to take one parameter called container, and all we want to do here is use container.querySelector, get our counter class and the text content of that class, and make it equal to 0, because once you hit the number of items that you want and click add to cart, we want this to reset back to 0. Now we want to reference our update order details function, and that's going to be the next function that we're about to go ahead and create. And we're going to use our cart items as the parameter here that goes into our function. So now we can create our update order details function, use a cart items parameter, and we want to create a constant variable called order details container, and we're going to use our document.getElementById and we want to go ahead and get our order details element, which is going to be located on our cart or order page. Use another if statement, checking to see if our order details container exists. So basically this is going to return true or false. What we want to do is change our order details container dot inner text to nothing, because each time we make an update to this, what we want to do is make sure that we're using the new items from our session storage. And we're actually going to change inner text to inner HTML here. And then we're going to use our cart items parameter here, and we're going to use our for each array loop, and we're going to pass in an item and an index as the parameters. And then we're going to use our arrow syntax for this callback function. And one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to create the total price variable up here, because we also want to track the total price of our items. We're going to initialize our total price as 0 here. Then within our for each loop here, we want to use our total price. We want to change this based on item.price times the item.quantity. And then we want to create another variable here, and this is going to be a variable where we reference our document to create a new element using create element here. And what we want to create is just a basic div right here. Then we want to reference our item element dot dataset dot item id equals item dot id. And then we want to copy and paste this and create one more to get our quantity. So we're just going to change id to quantity. This one needs to be lowercase. And then we want to add some basic classes that I already created to our item element. So we're going to use class list dot add, and we're going to add our order details class. Right? And we want to use another if statement and test if our item dot quantity is not equal to 0. And we want to create an item paragraph variable, make that equal to document dot create element, and what we want to do is create a p element. And then what we want to do here, and to save some time, I'll go ahead and copy and paste it. But what we want to do is we want to target our item.paragraph.text content and use our backticks here. And then we want to use our $ followed by our curly braces so we can dynamically render our item.name, our quantity, our price, and our item.price times the item quantity, and that's going to be divided by 100. So because we removed our decimal place earlier in today's video, and then we only want 2 decimal places here. And you guys will see all of this show up in a brief moment. And then for each time we run this loop, append my item paragraph to my item element. And we also want to have a remove button. So we're going to create a variable called remove button, and we're going to go ahead and create a button element using create element, and we're simply going to call this button here. And then we're going to change our remove button dot inner HTML here to our font awesome trash icon, just like so. And then I also want to append that to my item element. So I'll go ahead and use item element dot append child, and I want to append my remove button to it. And outside of that if statement, we want to use our order details container, and then we want to use dot append child, and we want to append our item element. And then down here, start off with a constant called total div, and that's going to be equal to document.create element. And what we want to do is create a div here, and we want to create a subtotal variable as well, which is going to be equal to our total price, because remember we don't have any decimal places for the dollars and cents, so we need to divide that by 100 so it will appear correctly in dollar format. And I want to create another constant called total, and what this is going to be is it's going to be a calculation for my total price plus the tax for it. So I'll go total price plus total price times 0.9%, which is a pretty average tax rate for most sales in the United States. And then once I'm done with that, I want to divide that by 100 to get the correct dollar format. And so our total div.innerHTML needs to be equal to, and we're going to go ahead and start off with backticks. These are not quotation marks, as they were not quotation marks up here when we were using them. And we're going to say subtotal followed by our dollar sign, which is actually going to appear on our client side, and then we need to put another dollar sign to dynamically render what's in our curly braces here. So this is only going to show $1 sign. And then we want to use our subtotal.toFixed because we only want 2 decimal places. So that's how we specify that. Then we're going to include a break tag here just to add some spacing. And then we're going to display our total the same way we did with our subtotal with $2 signs. And then we're going to reference our total, which is going to be our subtotal plus our tax rate. And then we're also going to use our toFixed method here to keep that to 2 decimal places. And then we want to append our total div to our order details container. So we're going to go ahead and reference our order details container. Then we're going to go append child again and append our total div. Up here I accidentally forgot a line of code. What we need to do is reference our remove button element here, create an event listener, and we want to listen for a click event. And then we're just going to create a brief arrow function here that removes this element using a function call to our remove item while passing in our index to that function. And this is going to again need to be a function that we need to create. So we'll go ahead and create that function down below, which is going to be called remove item. We're going to pass in an index as a parameter. And what we want to do is create a variable for our cart items. And we again want to use our JSON.parse here. And what we want to do is reference our session storage here dot get item, and we want to get our cart items because this is what we want to change. And then if for whatever reason we cannot reference that or it doesn't exist yet, we're just going to initialize it to an empty array. And then this is going to need to remove the index. So what we need to do is do cart items dot splice. And we want to splice it at the specific index that we're referencing, and we only want to remove 1 item there. Then we want to reference our session storage again, and we want to set our new item. So we're going to go set item, and we need to reference our cart items again because that's what we want to update. And we want to use JSON.stringify so we can convert that into a string, and we want to update our cart items. So when we click the trash can icon, what this is going to do is it's going to remove that index from our session storage. And then what we need to do is reference our update order details again, and then pass in our cart items one more time because we need to successfully update that in all areas, including our session storage and on our interface. And now we need to reference our update order details one more time all the way at the bottom. And the reason for this is when we go between pages, we don't want to lose that value from our session storage that's being added to our cart over here. And the way to do that is to make sure that it always runs when your DOM content is loaded. And that's why we're putting it all the way at the bottom. So even if you don't add anything to the cart, when you go back to your order/cart page here, your items will still appear in your cart. So we just need to include JSON.parse, reference our session storage. That's where we're going to be pulling the information from. And then we want to get items using our get item method here. And then we want to get our cart items again. So again, even if we switch pages, this will still successfully work. And then if that does not successfully return anything, what we want to do is just start off with an empty array. You're going to notice that we get an error, and it's because I did not successfully write this query selector here. I need to select the class, so I need to specify that with a period. What we need to do is add our div where it says order details. So right underneath your H3 element here, we need to add a div with the ID order details. And now you guys can see that it is successfully loading. So I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen, and you guys can see that if we click this, it's going to disappear. And if we go back to our home, let's say we want to add two pepperoni pizzas, one supreme pizza, and 3 cheese pizzas. We add that, go back to our cart, and all of these are showing up correctly. And we're getting one more error because our total price is not showing up under our order details. And what I did was I accidentally tried to call my total variable here when I really meant to call my total price variable. And again, I messed up my subtotal variable here. I need to capitalize that T right in there. So I messed it up somehow to where my subtotal and my total are displaying as not a number. And what the issue was is this needs to be quantity here at line 53, where I was checking for my existing pizza index. And at item.quantity, I also misspelled quantity again. And then down here where I'm updating my total price within my cart items for each loop, I again misspelled quantity. So if I go ahead and update that, you guys are gonna see that that error went away. Just don't be like me and continually misspell quantity and you should be fine. But let's go over here and make this full screen so you guys can see that I have one pepperoni pizza at $14.99 in my cart, and you can see the subtotal and the total with tax here. And if I click this trash can button, it will successfully disappear from my order/cart page. And then let's say I add 3 pepperoni pizzas, 1 supreme, and 2 cheese pizzas. All of these are going to successfully be added within my cart/order page with the respective quantities, prices, and subtotal and total all successfully displaying. And keep in mind, you guys can also use those loops to include the images of each one of these products. Now I actually added a quick overlay functionality. So when I go ahead and click the amount I want and click add to cart, I actually get a message that says checkout or keep shopping. And you can go ahead and click off of that overlay, or you can go directly to the checkout page like so with that. And if you select nothing and click it, it says you must select a quantity. If you guys want to see how to create these overlays, I have a whole video detailing that for you guys that I will leave links up top and down below. If you guys have any questions about the concepts that I covered here today, go down in the comments or go to our website at KelmanWebDesign.com, and I would love to help you guys out. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.